So, aloha, Dr. Musa Abdullah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. I'm doing great. Very, very, very honored to be on your program. Very honored to be here, sir.
Right on. Fantastic. Thank you. So, first off, I saw you on a 10 Black program.
Yes,
You
yes.
were talking about Donald Trump and his cutting the DOE.
Yeah, the Department of Education.
Right. Before we get to that, that's the second thing I want to talk about. First, I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell me about your background, tell my followers about your background. Um, I think you've been in education for it was 20 to 30 years ish, something like that. So just
Yeah,
go.
I've been in education for 24 years. My name is Dr. Musa Abdullah. I am an educator. I've been in working in the East Coast. I'm in New York City, but I work and have worked all of my educational years, except for one, in New Jersey. Always been in public education, district schools, worked in three districts outside of New York. I've been a educator on a post-secondary level for about 20 years at a community college, doing working in the TRIO program. And I also am a school social worker. I've been a disciplinarian, been uh, HIB coordinator. What else? Geez, I've done a lot of different roles, a lot of different hats in the educational space. I have my master's in social work, my educational specialist degree, and my education in doctoral administration leadership. So I also host a channel called All Things Education Official, that is educational news from a foundational Black American male's perspective, giving you educational news so that everybody in the community can be more aware of their options, be also more aware of the things that are out there for them in the educational spaces.
Okay. So all things education official. That's your
Yes,
website, you
sir.
said?
Yes, that is my channel. Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I have been in education, like I said, 24 years, and I always am hit with a lot of questions. Just, I mean, things as simple as why do they have to wear a uniform? And honestly, so small questions like, what do you guys talk about as at professional developments? All the way up to questions about curriculum and interventions, behavioral interventions, academic interventions. And I thought to myself, I said, a lot of these questions, because my student population has always been at least 98 to 99% Black American and fluctuates a little bit between Black American and Black immigrant, but always been Black melanated people that I've always serviced. And I said, well, let me create a channel that I can address a lot of the questions that a lot of the community may have about education, things they may think about, but may not have an educator in their immediate scope to have those discussions. So I said, let me create this channel, and I tried it at one time in 2015, but I didn't really have the spirit to do it. I just thought I'd throw it together, and I tried, and it just fell off. Then I said, you know what, I'm going to try it again, and started about a year ago, and it's been going pretty well this time.
Okay. You said it was like a few questions that people had about education that you were trying to answer in your channel. Can you give me like maybe the top two or three questions that people ask that you try to answer on your channel?
Yeah, well, one of the major questions always, and this is what I learned, a lot of things in reference to the questions brought to me were about race and education. And I started to see certain patterns. I started to see that typically the questions were coming from mothers in particular, but families of boy students. And these issues never really rose until they got to my area, my demographic, which is middle school to high school. I started off my educational career in alternative education. A lot of people don't know that alternative education has a lot of different layers to it, but the alternative education that I was a part of was the segment where we dealt with the children that were problematic, either behavioral, truancy. They were overage sometimes, so we had all of those students, and a lot of times we found just by going through the information given to us about each individual students that there was a ball that was dropped in elementary or maybe the beginning of junior high school. So you're talking maybe fifth or sixth grade. And that corresponds to a lot of data that shows that young Black boys typically begin to bump their head up against a wall when they become a little bit more older. They say they lose their baby teeth, their adult teeth come in, and I would have a lot of mothers come in and ask, why is his grades dropping all of a sudden? He was an all A and B student up until the fifth grade. And I just kept hearing this over and over and over again. And I just came to some conclusions that we can discuss later if you like. But that was always a question. Why did his grades drop when he reached the fifth or sixth grade? Why does it seem like he's getting into more fights with his peers and or authority? Also, why is it that it seems like when he was just a whiz at math and science, now all of a sudden he hates them and he doesn't want to do it anymore, and now it's tanking his GPA? And why is my son being retained? So I saw a lot of common themes about black boys in particular, and that has always been my focus. My dissertation focuses on black American boys as well.
Okay. So I live in Hawaii, right? So
All right.
we have a very small black population, but we have no majority population out here. There's nobody who's the majority. Like if you take total race, like Asians are the majority here, but like
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese, whatever, there's no majority of one, right?
Okay.
So I work with a lot of Polynesian kids who are brown, and um, what you were just saying, I work in the middle schools a lot. I work at a school. I work teach gym class for sixth grade right now,
Okay.
and so I see a lot of that where the boys at this age are starting to like change, like you said, like say not be as into class anymore, and they start not getting as good grades as they used to get. And it's do you have a thought as to maybe why that is?
Well, I and this is just now I must put this out there that a lot of it is what I'm speaking is little as much anecdotal
Right.
and personal experience over my time in in the field of education. But what I've found is that these young men, they start to get a little bit older. They're not cute anymore, and they are seen as a threat. As we all know,
Okay.
80% of the teaching force in America is white women. So you have these white women that are in the classroom, and before they were able to corral their entire student population, boys and girls,
Right.
But now the testosterone's kicking up in these boys. They're a little bit more, they have a lot more movement. They're starting to challenge, and a lot of times I find that they're challenging the academic process. They're asking the question, why? Why is that? That doesn't make sense. Make
Right.
that make sense.
Right.
Explain that. I don't get it. And a lot of teachers they look at that as a challenge to their authority,
Right.
and they become a thorn in their sides. And not to mention, we have a lot more energy as young men. I mean, that's not even dependent upon the race. Just boys in general have more energy. They have testosterone, whereas young ladies have estrogen. So you have women running the classroom, and a lot of times nowadays you have women administrators. So if a young boy is moving around, he wants to use his hands. There is a theory called build and destroy. Boys like to build up things, they tear them down, and they build them up again. That's just a part of the learning process for boys,
Right.
but girls don't have that. So women teachers tend to compare female students to the male students in their behaviors, not truly understanding that the learning styles are different. So these young boys are just acting as they are in a male way, masculine way. They're growing up into young men, and a lot of female teachers just they take umbrage with that. They don't like it. So now you have children that they're saying, "Oh, he's just too hyper," and when you hear those terms, he's hyper, he's all over the place. Well, now you have the parents are hearing this, they're getting phone calls, they're getting letters, they're getting emails and texts, and then this suggestion comes for evaluations. Now the teachers are saying, well, maybe we should just let them talk to the child study team, the evaluation team. And so then the process begins and I tell my young students, I say, once they start putting you on paper, we got to start being really careful. So then they start putting in what's called a 504 plan. an accommodation plan. So if the child is a little bit too rambunctious or they're a little bit too energetic, the teachers would recommend that they be evaluated. Well, you can't just evaluate a child off rip, so they got to put them in for a 504 plan as accommodation. So they put um, strategies in place to help the child be much more manageable in the classroom. Provided that those things don't work, well, now they're going to be attempting to evaluate the child for special education services. And typically, Black boys are um, diagnosed with emotional disability, emotional impairment, academic impairment, because, of course, the behavior is affecting the academics. Or what we have is OHI, which is other health impairments, which is, I call it a catch all term for special education. So you find a large number of Black boys that are in the special education process or in the programs or behavioral disorder. Now we all know that some young men and young women for that matter, or young men in particular, they do qualify for those services based upon environmental factors. Sometimes it's environmental. It could be the way they were reared. Their parental or family structures may warrant it, but not at the degree in which we see.
Okay. So, um, I had the same thing when I was young. I asked why all the time. I always wanted to know
Mm-hmm.
why. When my teacher would say stuff, I would raise my hands. I was very, very engaged in my classes. I would raise my hands to answer questions and raise my hand to ask why all the time. I raised my hands so
Right.
much. My teacher would tell me to stop raising my hands, so I get that. I had a
Yeah.
lot of energy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
One thing that's different now, to me, like you said, rambunctious and oh, like unmanageable. They
Well, I
don't
didn't
have.
say unmanageable. They become unmanageable to the teachers.
Well, I'm not saying that. Okay, yeah,
Okay.
but what I'm
All right.
saying is that we don't have gym class in school no more. We don't have a way to release the energy no more. Like it costs a lot of money to play sports after school. Like when I was younger, it was like $50 something I think to play football for the season. Now it's like $500,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
boys, like you said, have all that energy and they want to do stuff, and like you said, they want to build and destroy. They want to knock stuff down and build it up. Be it a baseball game, a football game, like that's kind of
Right.
building and destroying at the same time, right? You're trying to beat the other team. You're trying to build your team up, things like that, right? So
Right.
I think that has a big reason of to why boys these days are kind of out there, not out there, but just they don't have direction as much, or they're more rambunctious in the classroom, right? So do you have a thought of that, like when it comes to like say gym classes or after school sports for boys?
Oh, definitely. I personally believe that physical education, physical recess, and sports activities or any physical activity should be mandatory as a part of the curriculum.
I like that.
My really, really good friend, and he's like my big brother. His school that he went to, it was a private school, but it was mandatory that you be a part of a sport and an extracurricular program.
Yes, I
So
like
be
that.
it a language program, a debate club, but you had to be a part of
Okay.
a sport as well, intramural or competitive. So you had young people going home no early. They weren't getting out of school till about 6 o'clock every day.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to cap the possible potential for them to be out there doing something in the night on that downtime, which I say is between 3 and 6 p.m.
Exactly.
Also, it gives them an outlet. And Black boys in particular, I can only speak for Black boys, I can't speak for other boys. I mean, the data does shows that men in general, young boys in general, have these same seamless characteristics. But I speak for Black boys, the Black American boys in particular. We're very competitive, and that competition, it's a good competition. And it also teaches them the ability, it teaches them the skill set to be able to navigate in tough situations. You be able to control your emotions,
Right.
put
Yes.
plans into play, execute plans, study the plan. And
Mm-hmm.
also you burn off a lot of that extra energy. But I also like to consider like people to consider the fact that a lot of students, they're sitting in a desk, um, and when up until middle school, they're not transitioning classes. So they're sitting at a desk for 4 to 5 hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours before lunch.
Right.
And if they're not going out for recess, so they're sitting down in a cafeteria
Mm-hmm.
table for another 45 minutes to an hour. Then they go right back to their room and sit in that desk for about 3 more hours. And I ask adults, how would you feel if you had to sit at a desk for 6 to 7 hours? You had to ask permission to use the restroom. If you got up, you were scrutinized. And don't let it be that was your second or third time getting up. Now you're being punished for getting up.
Right.
How would you feel as an adult? So imagine a child who has tons of energy, wants to just show himself, show herself around the room, figure things out, learn by touching. How would you feel if you were that child? And it changes the perspective of a lot of adults when they think of it that way.
Right. I like that. So, I could talk about education forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about language programs and then the after school thing. So I
Mhm.
started an after school program in 2016 called Hapa Mana. So as I said, I live in Hawaii. Hapa is like integrate, mix. It's literally half, but they call people who are mixed Hapa. And then Mana is spirit or Mana. So it's like the integrating spirit, integrating, energy and whatnot. And so I
And
wrote a
when you
lot
say
of
happy, you mean half Asian Pacific Islander?
Hapa. No, it's just half anything. Like I'm half black and half white. And so when I moved
Okay.
out here, I wouldn't even know people. And from across the street, people would yell, Hoppa, Hoppa. And after a while, I knew it was me. And I just turned around and started waving. And people would just yell at me. And people would run across the street at me yelling, Hoppa. And just, they thought it was so cool that I looked the way I did, I guess, right? And so
Okay.
out here, people, like little kids, are from all over the islands and stuff, and it's normal for someone to have 5 or 6 different races in them, right? And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm Hawaiian, Portuguese, Russian, this and that," right? And it's all these
Okay.
stuff from all over the world. And I've heard little kids at schools actually say, "Well, I'm these 3 or 4 things," and another kid say, "Well, I'm like these 5 or 6 things," and then the other kid will add in 2 or 3 more things to have more things in them. They go back and forth,
Right.
adding
Right.
things. Rather, they want to be more stuff rather than be one thing by themselves.
Okay.
But where I was going with that is out here, I've had talks. So, like I said, I want to get to the Donald Trump thing and the Green Party thing, but kind of the Green Party thing, we've talked about Hawaii and Hawaiian sovereignty and how we've taken over Puerto Rico, maybe Puerto Rican sovereignty. And the thing I say to people like that as a leftist, we eventually want a whole one world type of deal, right? So I don't want to actually be breaking things up. Like I don't want Hawaii to leave America per se. I don't want Puerto Rico to leave America. I'd rather Puerto Rico become a state and give them full rights. I'd rather the Virgin Islands become a state and give them full rights. But I'd rather stop America from being what do you call it, like an imperialist force, right? I'd rather America
Okay.
be a better thing, and people want to be part of America and spread what America is, or just spread what people are. But we need to be one Earth at some point. But getting back to the language thing, I tell people instead of trying to break away from America, what we need to do in Hawaii is every school should teach Hawaiian language and Hawaiian culture. Anybody that's born in Hawaii that goes through the Hawaiian school system should know Hawaiian and English, right? They should speak Hawaiian fluently. And that should be the same. And like, so we take that to the mainland. Like, we have Puerto Rico, we have the Virgin Islands, we have Hawaii, we have Samoa, we have a couple other places. We should teach those languages and those cultures throughout the mainland of America to that way we show the Hawaii, we show Samoa, we show the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico that we actually like care about them, that they're part of America. And now Americans can speak, say, 2, 3, 5 languages, where like the rest of the world speaks more than one language, right? Like we're the only place in the world that says we're American, speak American. We only speak one language. And when I was young, I kind of thought that way because I was young. That's what they told me to do. But I moved to
Mhm.
Hawaii, and it's like everybody can speak all these other languages, and I'm the only person in Hawaii that only speaks one language, and it makes me feel weird, right? Like not weird, but like less educated, right? Why can't I speak at least one other language? Everyone else does. But I kind of rambled there. But what do you think about that? Like teaching the languages of the people that either we conquered or that's part of America, like even Native Americans, right? Like we should speak some Native American languages to me and know their culture more, and that way, as we spread, we don't kill culture, we don't kill people, we melting pot it, we bring it in.
Well, I'll say this. I genuinely believe that let me try to approach this. Okay. I genuinely believe that a lot of what we learn is purely based on one, the region, it's
Yes.
based on the city and the state.
Yes.
And for example, I'm a New Yorker, so I live in Brooklyn. But in my area where I live, it's predominantly Black Americans, and there's a lot of Caribbean, and there's some Latino. So what you'll hear commonly in the streets is what they call BEV, Black English Vernacular, from the Eastern region. That's what you'll hear. Well, if you go to the Bronx, particular areas of the Bronx, you're going to hear a lot of Spanish, and it's going to be Caribbean Spanish because that's the area,
Right.
right? But I do genuinely believe that all offerings should be made. The problem is who's going to teach it,
Right.
because you're not going to have those individuals who know the languages, all those languages in those areas. Now, we can always speak to incentives. If you're going
Right.
to incentivize people to, let me ask a question. What's the language that's spoken in Hawaii?
Well, Hawaii, the island speaks Hawaiian.
Okay, so
So,
that's the language, Hawaiian. Okay.
right, but
All right.
since like we took the
So,
island, so I think we should teach the island's language. That's why I say
okay.
specific here. So it would be a little bit different in each place, like you're kind of saying.
Right. So if I truly believe that wherever you are, wherever there's a large influx of a group, and there's an infuse of a culture, I think that the people should have access to that language knowledge. For example, if you live in certain parts of Queens, I think they would behoove you to know Mandarin. It would behoove you to be able to know and recognize Korean letters because there is an influx, there's a large number of people. But the thing about the mainland, what I know living in New York, is that the demographics change every, let's say 15 to 20 years. For example, where I live, I want to say north of where I live was predominantly Black American and Caribbean. Well, now, 20 years later, it's a large Bengali population there now. So you'd have to consider that when you're talking about what languages would you teach in the local schools. Then you'd have to incentivize teachers to say, hey, if you learn this language, if you're certified to teach it, we'll pay you, not only will pay you more, we'll pay you um, and maybe forgive your loans for getting this certification. So when it comes to education, I'm a proponent for getting as much possible and offering as much to children as we possibly can. So when you start talking about language acquisition, I truly believe it. I'm a remedial speaker of Portuguese only because I practiced capoeira for about
Oh,
15
nice.
years. So I learned Portuguese only because I would travel to Brazil and because my masters, my teachers of capoeira were from Brazil.
Nice. I had my
But I
daughter
learned
take
Brazilian
capoeira.
Portuguese. I didn't learn Portuguese from Portugal. So the
Okay.
Portuguese from Portugal is very different.
Yeah.
So I do believe in the infuse of languages. I genuinely believe that all students, though, and I'm with you on that, should know more than one language
Right. Yes.
because English being the language of commerce, it it shows other cultures that you respect their culture by communicating with them in their home language.
Exactly. And so, um, I want to get to the Trump cutting the DOE thing, but you said something about Mandarin, and so, like I said, I could talk about education all day, and I kind of already want to talk to you again if that's cool, but we'll talk
Of
about that
course.
later. So you said Mandarin, and like in the U.S., we've talked about China and Russia for the last since I've been alive, right?
Right.
And so to me, I don't understand why if China and Russia are so important, why every American doesn't speak Mandarin and Russian. Like, because you could have a Russian mafia dude sitting right next to me, and I don't know about you, but sitting next to me and most of my friends, speaking Russian to his dude, right? And they could say, oh, we're going to take his pop or his soda, we're going to take his lunch and walk off and hit him in the head or something, right? They could say whatever they want to do to me in Russian. And I'd have no idea.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump and the rest of the American people want to tell me Russians and Chinese are the most important people in the world because they're our enemies, this and that. why can't we understand our enemies? Like, I don't think there are enemies to me. I've met Chinese and Russian people in Hawaii, like, because people come here from all over the world. So I've actually met just regular Chinese and Russian people and spoken to them.
Mhm.
And they're normal, regular people. But if you want to do some espionage type stuff, you could send any regular Russian or any regular Chinese person to America, and we'd have no idea what they were doing if they just spoke in the regular language. Like, to me, that
Well,
seems weird.
well, let me speak to that. It's just so interesting that you said it because I was literally just in the Russian, one of the Russian sections of Brooklyn yesterday, called Brighton Beach. Brighton Beach has a very heavy Russian population, so much so that all the signs around are in Russian. And I,
Yeah.
I met up with a guy, briefly, and he was Russian, and people have got to be very honest about how the nation is set up. Unlike Hawaii, specifically, I speak specifically to New York, we're extremely segregated. The
Mm.
likelihood of us being in those same spaces where those things could actually happen are so slim. It's merely in passing. And and I try to explain the level of hierarchy or we could just say racism that exists in New York. New York's racism is very, very distinct in that people of the dominant society, you start talking about European descended Americans, um, the way they really show their racism is to ignore you. They're very apathetic to your existence. So you could be in the same room with them and it's like you don't exist to them. And people such as myself, I don't have a problem with that. I
Right.
genuinely don't. Because I'm in my own world, I'm with my people, and that's how we're, and that's how the country's pretty much set up. So we don't really cross cultures. But if you start talking about commerce, trade, business, it would behoove everyone who is saying, I want to do an international business degree, or I want to study international business. It would behoove you to study Mandarin and Russian. It makes no sense that you don't. But someone such as myself, who's in education, I literally have no need for the Russian language outside of it just being an enhancement to myself as an individual.
Right. I just I just think that as you learn more as a youth, right? Like when you're 3 to 5, 6 years old, it's easier, much easier to learn a language. And so
Hmm.
just I would think that in the U.S. we should just try to learn languages more, but like, and that way we could travel more. But in the world,
I agree.
it's not
I
way
agree.
easy to travel right now for most people anyway. But if it was easier to travel, it'd be cool to be able to speak the language, at least try to speak the local language.
Yeah, I agree totally. I do agree totally. I think that, but you know what? The thing about it so interesting is that other countries know our deficiency when it comes to that.
Right.
So much so that they set up small enclaves in their country
For
that
us.
caters to Americans.
Right.
You can go to an entirely different country and never have to worry about another language, another a speaker of another language coming to you and you not being able to get what you need. Because once they hear English, they know someone or they'll be able to direct you to some
Someone that knows
place
it. Yes.
where they can translate and get you all the things you need. Like if you go to most Caribbean nations, and let's take Dominican Republic for instance, the resorts, it's like you just went to a resort maybe in Florida. It doesn't really, it's seamless. Everyone speaks English. They offer you the same foods. You can choose to have their local cuisine if you'd like,
Right.
but you'd have to venture out to find these things. But I do agree 100% that learning those languages would help travel become a little bit more open. I think a lot of Americans just don't travel because they're like, hey, I'm American, I'm good, I'm here. Me
Yeah. We.
myself, I've been to a ton of different other countries, and that's because I find value in experiencing other cultures in their raw form. And I'm not talking about, um, for example, I went to the Virgin Islands. I'll never forget. Went to the Virgin Islands, and it was a cruise, and everybody went this way, and I looked to the left, and I saw a street, and I saw stores on it. So I went to the left, and some people say you don't want to go there. That's not really, where the tourists go. I said, then that's where I want to go.
Right.
And I went, and eventually I found a Kmart before they closed. I bought some trunks there. I ate at a local restaurant. People were looking at us like we were weird because people don't typically venture there.
Right.
But you have to have that adventurous spirit and be a little bit, a little crazy because it could be dangerous.
Right.
But I believe when you go to another country, if you're still sticking within your comfort zone of English speakers and your local, your traditional cuisine, why are you there? You could have did that at home.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. So I want to transition into when I saw you on the Tim Black show. You guys were talking about Donald Trump cutting the DOE, and
Right,
since then, I've seen a lot of stories that he's cut about half the DOE. A lot of people have
right,
lost their jobs and whatnot. You were
right.
saying I don't want to misquote you or whatever, but so tell I don't want to quote you at all. How about you tell us what you think about the DOE and since the Tim Black show and the cuts that he's actually made? What do you think from then? What you were thinking then, and then what you've seen done until now, basically.
Listen, I'm in a school now. I have yet to even hear anything. People would say, "Oh, you're not looking out for, you're not listening, you're not paying attention." Well, that kind of reminds me of when the Biden administration used to tell us, "You don't really know what we're doing for you because you're not researching it."
Right.
I would
So.
always tell people, I say, "Well, if you were doing something for me, wouldn't I see or feel the effects of it somewhere down the line?" And I said on brother Tim Black's show, I said, in 24 years of education, I've never met a person that works for the Department of Education. I've never spoken to a person that works for the Department of Education outside of maybe a representative for my student loans. And I've never even seen where there was a benefit to the Department of Education. And I want to make a clarification statement. The Department of Education, as we know it today, and I have to say that because they're going to come on your channel, they love to correct you when you make a small error. So I'm gonna make sure I'm good for across the spectrum.
Right on.
When the Department of Education in its form today was established under Carter in 1979, and it did not go into effect until 1980. So you're talking about I had been in schools already, and there was no Department of Education. When the Department of Education came on board, I didn't feel any effects. My mother and my parents and my family never spoke of any effects that made anything better. But the one thing I can speak to is the No Child Left Behind Act. People say, "Oh no, the Department of Education didn't create it; it was created by Congress." Truly, it was. But the Department of Education was tasked with enforcing No Child Left Behind, which was a tragedy, particularly to urban students. And when you say urban, that's a buzzword for Black students
Right.
first and other minoritized groups second. So we suffered the brunt of it. I was in education during No Child Left Behind, and it was terrible. And they focused on standardized testing, core content, and they wanted to talk about standardized testing with differentiated teaching. So right there, you knew it was going to be a failure. And the Department of Education was tasked with enforcing that. And so I will stand firm on this position. I will die on this hill. I don't see, and I'm going to say that specifically, I don't see nor feel a benefit to the Department of Education as an entity. Now, people would say, well, they help manage student loans and they give out Pell Grants. All of that could be eliminated if we have free education. That's one. Two,
Okay.
if we were talking about the states maintaining it, that's what had been up until 1980. So the Department of Education is just another layer of bureaucracy that I don't see the benefit in having.
So that was interesting that you said free education. At least interesting to me. So is that one of the things that the Trump administration is talking about, or is that one of the things that might come out of getting rid of the DOE? Like, what does that mean? Or,
No,
okay,
no, no.
I'm not. That's why I
Definitely
asked.
not.
Okay,
No, they are more, and it's a slippery slope when you start talking about the Trump administration with the Department of Education because you start getting into terms like state funded, state sanctioned, states' rights. And if you're a Black American, you hear the word states' rights,
right,
automatically
yeah.
take back to chattel slavery, in that push. But I think that if done in, in sincerity, not if you're not being disingenuous in your attempts to increase the output, positive output of education, I think that kicking it to the states is a good thing because it's less hands in the pot. The money that is collected from the states goes 80% of every dollar goes to public education. You know, I'm a firm believer that that money should go spread evenly across the state, not based upon, okay, well, this town, their tax rate for a
Right.
property is 8,000 per year. Well, this town, the tax rate is 3,000 per year. Nope.
Right.
Put it all into one pot. That will guarantee everyone gets the same level of funding for their educational institutions per city and town. With that being said, making the states responsible. Um, of course, people say, what's less oversight? What would happen if the state would do this? They decided they want to do that. Well, that's why you would have to be more savvy and a little bit more educated about the political process. You'd have to be more in tune with who's representing you on a political level. Your mayors, your governors, your council people, your city board, your school board members. Those people would have to be selected at majority. And so there would be, and I'm being honest with you if I'm being transparent, there would be some migrations from state to state based upon academics, but that's already happening.
Yeah, well,
People
that's
already
true. Yeah.
migrate state to state, city to city based on educational policy. So you wouldn't see that much of an uptick in that, but you would see probably more state to state migration based on educational policies.
Okay. So you said taking it to the states would make put less hands in the pot, right? So there'd be less people grabbing the money. What about poor states? Like, because Alabama, Louisiana, right, they're really poor. And New York, California, Hawaii, the states that have money, Nevada, pay for those states a lot, right?
Right.
So what would happen to their education if would we still spread money over the states? Like you were saying, you wanted the state, no matter the county,
Mhm.
their money spreads to the state. Does that happen through the country, or does the poor state have just less money for education than say New York or California?
Well, of course, I think, of course, we know that educational costs are based upon the cost of living in the state, city, and state. But I would say that that is where these states, they would, of course, it starts at the bottom with their infrastructure. Of course, they would have to create more industry that would generate more revenue, which would attract more people. Attract more people, you build more homes. More homes means more tax, property tax dollars. They may have to change their structure. They may have to change, those poorer states may have to change the structure of taking the majority of their tax dollars from property taxes to taking it from maybe the taxation of businesses. That may be an option for them. But if not, I think one of the most kind of glaring possibilities is that they would have to go to the government to gain access to funds. But you don't have to then have an entire department for that. I
Oh, okay,
think
I
that
see.
I think they would go directly to the government for access to funds for their particular state for these particular ventures. And
I
we talk
see.
about
I see.
academic adventure,
So like
academic ventures.
the bottom 10 or 15 states or so would probably need some money because I don't think most of the states would, just a few. So like they
Right.
would be able to go petition the government for money.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. I get that. Okay, so I told you that I was going to be running for U.S. Senate in Hawaii for the Green Party.
I saw that. I saw you told me that. Yes, sir.
Okay, I do not know your politics at all. So you can just, if you like, tell me a little bit about your politics.
Well, I am a registered independent. I
Okay,
truly believe all Black Americans should be independent.
okay,
We've been married to the Democratic Party for 60 plus years, and we've gained nothing except the Civil Rights Act. That's the last thing we've gained. I believe that we should support politicians that have policy with our best interest, in our best interest. The Green Party has always been a party that I've always admired because of their policy stances. Um, and if there were a Green Party candidate that were running, for a particular office, particularly in my area, because I know the stance on reparations. I know the stance on education and healthcare. I'd vote green, you know, but I'm being very clear and transparent. If there was a, let's say, a Republican or a Democrat who I knew could get the policies that I needed for my community in place, I knew they had a greater shot at winning, and they were going to put those policies in place, I'd vote for that too. I vote for policy,
Right.
not for politician and not for party.
Exactly. So what I do is I get my ballot sent to my house, right? I vote from home,
Mm,
and I just Google everybody. Like there's certain people I know already that I want to vote for, but then when I
right.
look at the down ballot and the people that nobody knows, right? I just Google everybody, and it takes me like 3 or 4 hours to vote normally because I just sit there and
Right.
Google everybody and see who I want. And I
Hmm.
will vote for Republican. I vote for Independents and Democrats. Like you said, if they for the policy that I want, right? Like it really doesn't
Right.
matter what you put behind your name. I care about your policies more. So
Right.
one thing I'm doing is, as I'm trying to get all the Green Party people together, I actually yesterday spent about 5 hours online finding every Green Party email I could find, and I got about 200. And I'm writing a big email to all the Green Party people throughout the country, and I'm
Okay.
trying to start like a movement. I want us to get on the YouTube channels. I want us to talk to people like you. I want us to talk to everybody and get out there, because there are Green Party people in your area that do have more your ideals and stuff. Like you said, our thing on reparations. Like we are pro reparations. At least most of the people
Right.
in the Green Party. Not everybody's going to be lockstep with everything, right? But we are
Right.
universal health care. We're nonviolent. We want to stop all the wars.
Hmm.
We're pro reparations. Like I said, like free schooling. We want pre-K and at least free, what do you call it, like state college. Like you can still probably have
Yeah.
private college, but at least free state college, right? Things like
Right.
that. And so one thing we're big on is permaculture to like stop help with food insecurities. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like I said, I started that nonprofit. One of the things we started doing was building a food forest in a low income housing area. And I think we
Nice.
should do that around schools where you plant like big fruit trees and like vegetables and things like
Yeah.
that around the schools, where you have a permaculture teacher in each school or maybe in each area that goes around. They teach the kids classes about growing plants, trees, and stuff, and like have them pick it and maybe even make their own breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes, or breakfast and lunch since we're at school, probably not dinner. But yeah. So I think that the Green Party, we are small, right? Well, I don't know if we're small, but we're just not strong. But I'm trying
Right.
to talk to people like you. I'm trying to just talk to everybody that I can. That, like, even like you said, that we're probably more aligned with you, right? We're just
Right.
not as strong
Right.
as we need to be for you to want us to give us our vote. You'd rather probably vote for a Democrat who has, like, say, half of your principles, because they can win and beat the Republican that has none of your principles. Or if the Republican had half of your principles and the Democrat had none, you'd probably rather vote for the Republican. Because even if we had all your principles, we're probably not going to win. Which,
Right. And I'm gonna tell you, I've always been that was always been my the biggest bug I had in myself, a big bug up my butt is when it comes to the Green Party. I'm like, man, they got all the things that the black community wants and needs just as a
exactly.
base platform. I mean,
Yes.
base. Of course, as you said, people don't always aren't in lockstep
Right,
with
with everything.
everything just
Right.
because you're part of a party. But just the mere fact that they are willing to say, we want reparations for the descendants of chattel slavery in America. That in itself is heartwarming for people such as myself who are considered reparationists. We believe that. And we're like, this is the only party who's actually saying it. But the likelihood of them winning high office elections are so slim that it's just like, but I don't believe in wasted votes. That's a theory I don't even believe in. I don't,
Right.
you waste a vote. I
It's
don't
your
believe
vote.
that. You voted for who you voted for. You
Exactly.
voted because you believe in a person. You believe in their what they told you. You believe with the policies that they presented to you. So you didn't waste your vote. It's my vote. It's for me. So how did I waste it? It's
Exactly.
wasting it to you because you wouldn't have voted that way. You know. In this last election, I voted for Cornel West. You
Nice.
know,
Okay.
and I had people telling me that I wasted my vote. I'm like, how did I waste my vote? I mean, they were like, oh, well, you knew he wasn't going to win. It doesn't matter.
But who you
I understand the policies that he pushed for.
and who
You
you
can,
supposed to vote for? Which one's not wasting your vote?
Right, exactly. Wasting my vote would be to vote for someone who I know for a fact does not have my community's interest at heart.
Right.
But
So
I believe in what I believe in the platform that the Green Party has. But I just want them to just strengthen themselves. And but the thing about it, very interesting though, and I tried to tell someone this, I said, it's not for lack of having intelligent candidates, charismatic candidates, because they've had both.
right.
Jill Stein was green, right?
Mm-hmm. Jill
And
Stein
her
and
running
Butchware.
mate, what was her running mate's name?
Butchware.
Butch Ware. He's
Yes.
charismatic. He's intelligent. So it's not for lack of that. It's just that I know that the machine, the political machine, goes out of their way to silence parties like the Green Party or independents. So they're not only fighting an uphill battle as far as recognition, they're fighting an uphill battle financially. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
something that we have to always work on as a collective group of people.
Right. And so that's a big reason why YouTube is very important, right? Because it doesn't cost anything to talk to you right now, just some time, right?
Right.
And so that's part of the email I'm writing. I'm gonna get them hit to all the YouTube channels, all the left wing YouTube channels, all the liberal YouTube channels, all the channels that just have views and stuff, and so that we can try to promote ourselves without having to, like you said, spend as much money, because that is one of the big setbacks that we have, is that we just don't have as much money.
Well, I would challenge you too, brother, to send this information out to the conservatives as well, because there are always conservatives who are just socially conservative, or maybe they
Right.
may only be fiscally conservative, but they're liberal when it comes to their social values. So just getting the information, I think one of the problems in politics, which trickles down into education, is that we're in echo chambers. We're
Mm-hmm.
only talking and listening to people who think like us. And it wasn't until I began to listen to conservative voices that I began to understand some of the perspectives. And I identify myself as a social conservative. I'm a social conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that proudly, but to be very honest with you, most Black Americans are social conservatives. They don't think they are, but when you start talking about the things they do and do not like, the things they care and care about, they do not care about, it's social conservatism. So something to consider.
Okay. Well, something you said was, don't just focus on the left, but look at the right. That's why I
Mhm.
named my channel Across the Spectrum, because I
All
like to
right.
look at things from as far left and as far right as I can. Like, I look
All right.
at things from the communist view to the fascist view, and sometimes I walk around with just my phone in my pocket, just playing the YouTube channel. Right, I'm not even looking at it. You can just hear it. I'm just listening as I walk around, and so I'll be around people and they'll hear my phone and they'll hear like a right wing channel talking in my phone just because I'm listening to it. Right, it'll be like a Charlie Kirk or even maybe about Hitler or something. I even listen
Right.
to like pro Hitler stuff sometimes just to hear why they would
Right.
say it. Right, and so people will sometimes look at me and be like, "What are you listening to? Are you do you like that?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I just I listen to everything. I want to hear everybody's view. I just want to know,
Right.
like, if I ever talk to somebody that has this view, I at least want to be able to say something to them and not just be totally amazed that they have this view. Just like understand them a bit, right? Because it's better if you
Right.
understand people at least a little bit, right? If you're like, oh, I
Right.
have no
I definitely
idea why
see.
you think this way, then they're gonna be like, well, I don't care about you either, then, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I think a lot of times people don't do it because and it's interesting because I remember, I'm going to share a little story. I dated a young lady. This was back in college. And, I'm Muslim,
Okay.
and this young lady was Christian. And, I've always prided myself on being a reader. I like to read a lot. So I always was at this point in time, and when I was young, a young Muslim, I was used to do a lot of studying of Islam and Christianity because my family primarily is Christian. Um, so I would read a lot about Christianity as well. Um, but so one day we were just having a conversation, and she was just telling me things about Christianity that I knew were false. So I was telling her no, and I would not only tell her the error of the statement, but where in the Bible she could find the correction. And
Right.
she said something to me. She said, "Stop, just stop. You're scaring me." I was like, "What do you mean I'm scaring you?" She said, "Because now you're making me question things."
Mm.
And I think a lot of it is that. A lot of people
Right.
don't want to find flaw in their original thinking. So they would rather just cut it all off, dealing in an echo chamber, and they're content with that. But I think that what you're doing is what most people should do. They should listen to every single area of life, every facet, every viewpoint. So then when they are confronted with it, it's not a shock,
Right.
you
Yes.
know. And I think that's what it is. Sometimes we get caught up in emotionalism because we have never heard some of these perspectives, where me
Right.
myself,
Yes.
I'm less shocked by things because I've read a lot, I've traveled a lot, and I am open to all facets of thought.
Right. So in that thought right there, I would I was in Florida. My dad and my sister live in Florida, and I was there for about 6 months. And my dad listens to a lot of CNN and MSNBC, which is way different than
Right.
anything I hear. Right? Like I only listen to them like through other people. I don't even listen to liberal media just because to me it's just like nonsense.
Right.
But they would hear Donald Trump say things, and they would hear right wingers say things, and they'd be like, "Oh, they hate us. Oh, they're racist. All this, that, and the other." And I'd be like, "Well, no, that's not what they meant by that. They meant this, right?" And I would say things
Right.
like I would understand what they meant and try to break it down to them, and they would look at me like, "Do you agree with them?" And I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying. I understand what they're saying. I understand why they
Right.
want to do stuff. So, like, to me, one of the big things between the far right and the far left, or right and left, is right wing people are more capitalist. They think that money
Mhm.
and doing capitalism the right way can organize society. Left
Right.
wing people don't believe in the invisible hand. We think that we should organize society through a mental process for people, right? We think about people first, and we want to take that mathematical equation, see how much resources we have, how much people we have, and mathematically do it ourselves, rather than let people have money. Not necessarily let people have money, but let money, organize society. Because especially now, we've started this game of Monopoly so skewed, right? Like Elon Musk and certain people have billions, other people have millions, some people have zeros, and then some people have negatives. So if
Right.
money is power, is language, is the ability to control like schools and shipping and businesses and things, right? And so there's just so like to me that's the big difference in right and left. Is just that money organizes society, or people organize society for people. And that's kind of what I try to tell people. And when you look at it that way, when Donald Trump or the right wing says something that you kind of think might be racist or might be a little bit this or that, they're just thinking of it through a monetary term that in the long run, through money, it'll help society. And just that's just the way it needs to be, kind of.
Yeah. I agree. I think that also I truly believe that a lot of policies from the right wing perspective, as how you said, is based upon finance. So, well, if you're coming from a left wing perspective, or the right wing sounds biased all the time because they're coming from their own viewpoint. They're coming from their own lens of understanding. They're saying, well, if you were to, and they say when, and the thing about it is the word you it could be an epithet, or it could just be a pronoun, it depends on who's using it. What's it, if you just decided to work with your own group and build resources, then we wouldn't have these issues in your community. Well, if you just take the emotionalism out of it, it actually is a true statement. If communities were able to come together collectively and amass and pool their resources and create economies, there would be certain things that would not occur. For example, I just was listening to Dr. Amos Wilson, and there was a study done that stated that in areas that have predominantly Black American physicians as primary care physicians, the mortality rate for the Black residents or citizens
It's higher.
significantly decreases. Well, people say, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it does make sense, but you got to peel back that layer, peel back the layers. Now, in order to have a lot of Black physicians, they've got to go to school,
Right.
medical school. In order for them to go to medical school, they had to have excelled in their undergrad career. In order for them to have excelled in their undergrad career, they would have had to have had some introduction to the field and a moniker of uh, um, more. Let me see. How can I best say it? They would have to have a little bit more exposure to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to the level in which they can understand it. In order for that to happen, they would have had to have better schools. In order for that to happen, they would have had to have a greater economic base or taxation base.
Right.
In order for that to happen, you'd have to have better industry, more educated constituents or residents of those cities and towns. So everything goes all the way back to the taxation of individuals and them having the necessary resources to be taxed. So you started off with doctors in a particular area increasing the mortality rates of black citizens in this particular area. In order to have that, it goes all the way back to the proper education of the children. So it all is linked. So if you have somebody says you need to do this, then you have to start having the conversation with those people. Say, well, what is the governmental structure? What are people willing to do to get us to this place? And a lot of times it's starting at the base, it's starting at the foundation, the floor.
Right. And so, like, that there, Stephen A. Smith and other people will say they're fiscally conservative but socially progressive. And so what you just said there is that it comes back to the taxation to make the social things happen, right? The schools happen or whatever. So
Right.
to me, like, you said you were kind of conservative, and I'd like you to explain like how you said most black people are conservative when you get down to it. Because to me, I think it's opposite. I think most black people are progressive when you get down to it if you ask them the base things. So like to me, the socially, what is it, socially progressive but fiscally conservative, if you can't take the tax base to make the social progressive things go, then are you really socially progressive? Because you have to be fiscally progressive to get the tax base or the
Right.
taxes or whatnot.
You can't say you're progressive and be fiscally conservative because fiscal conservatives do not agree with reparations.
Okay.
They don't agree with it, right? So if you're believing that, if you do acknowledge that the foundational Black American community is owed a debt, let's use that, use my community. If they're owed a debt, well, if you believe socially in the social progression that they are owed a debt, you can't turn around and say, but they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's a handout.
Right.
You got to pick one. They're in total opposition. They're antithetical to one another. So when I say I'm a social conservative, I believe in traditional families, traditional family values. I believe in a man and a woman, children, creating economies within our neighborhood, being more insulated, contributing, being patriotic to the nation, supporting the nation, as all Black Americans have. We've fought in every single war. We've contributed to the fabric. We have built this country on our backs with with our labor, which helped to generate trillions of dollars. It's probably can't even be calculated at this point the amount of
Right.
money. So we've given ourselves blood, sweat, and tears are in this soil. So we believe in that. So we believe in America. We believe in the promise of America. We believe that the promise just has not been realized, but we believe in it. And we believe in people working. We believe in hard work, and we believe in being educated and teaching, and our children being the next rung on the ladder upwards. So that's what I mean when I say social conservative.
Right. Okay, and we've been on a lot longer than I thought we might be. I didn't know
It's
how long you
okay.
would want
It's
to be
all right.
on. Your interview with Tim Black was only about 15, 20 minutes, so I didn't know how long you were giving people. But one last thing
Mhm.
before we go. What'd you just say? Technician. Oh man, I just drew a blank. I wanted to ask you something. What, like, can you repeat what you just said a second? Or
I don't know, brother. I said a lot. I was talking about social conservatism and talking about you know, the nuclear family being a part of this fabric of this nation, education, learning, having our children become the next rung up, having our children do better than we did to create insulated communities so that we can contribute to the overall community.
I forget exactly what I wanted. It was something about social conservative, but the insulated communities and stuff like that, I like that, and that's like a libertarian view a little bit. But
Yeah.
like from the left, we're one world. Like we can have communities, but we still
Hmm.
need to have those communities connected because like if your community's on a river and my community's downstream on that river, what you do to that river means something to me and my community, right? So we
I
still
agree.
need the greater community, like the world community to me. Like right now we have the US community and then the North American community, whatever. But
Right.
like how China has BRICS and Russia and stuff, like we need to be one world because if China pollutes the air, we're gonna breathe it later. They're gonna breathe our air
Right.
later, right?
Right.
So the that's what I think. Like when people talk about smaller communities and stuff, like I agree that we need strong small communities, but I think we need a strong large community, a strong whole community. The entire world needs to think together and be one thing, and then we could be smaller within that. But I just think that sometimes people think too separate, right? Like our community is going to do this community is going to do that. Not necessarily
Well,
saying that's what you were saying.
well, you know what? I'm going to say this, and I was actually had a conversation with someone about a week ago, and I said that the primary reason that the Black American community needs to create a community, not just neighborhoods, like the AAPI community, like the Eastern Europeans, and I'm not talking about New York specifically. I can name these specific areas that you can go to where they have their own insulated communities. The the Hasidic Jewish community has multiple enclaves throughout New York City. And they have their own industries that they work within. And the one thing that it creates is choice, options. Um, if I'm an accountant, I'm going to utilize myself. Let's say I'm an educator. I'm an educator, and I have a community that's self-sustaining, that's insulated. Well, I can choose to teach within my community specifically, teach children and families who look like me, who understand me 100%, less pushback in a lot of different areas. Or
Right.
I can choose to go outside of my community and teach. That's a choice. Right now, the foundational Black American community does not have that choice. We have to work within other communities just to sustain ourselves because we do not have a community of our own where we have our own banking systems, educational systems, manufacturing productions. We don't have those. And that is one of the things I really wish that we can get to. But like you said, once those communities are established, of course, we'll do trade and commerce and we'll intercultural sharing. So everyone will benefit. So one won't be seen as a draw or a drain upon the other.
That so the black community type bank type thing, I think that's
Yeah.
probably more of a bigger subject. And if you're willing to talk to me again, I think we could go deeper into that because I think that would take a little bit more than a few minutes to talk about.
Well, brother, I tell you what, anytime you want me to come on, just chop it up. I'm game, man. I want to see you grow, and I like the direction that you're going.
Right on, awesome. I enjoyed your time. It was a great chat, and yeah, I will email you within probably a couple hours. I actually have a meeting for the Green Party after this, and
All right, brother.
we're doing our official selections for who's running for what. So
Okay.
I've been saying
Okay.
I'm running for U.S. Senate, but it'll be official in about 2 or 3 hours. And if
Okay.
somebody takes my spot for that, I'll run for something else.
All
Okay.
right, brother. Well, go ahead, do your thing, man. I appreciate you, man. I really, really do.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. I will talk to you soon. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.